Barack Obama, in a recent interview, said that Joe Biden should raise the religious freedom issue as far as India is concerned, as he would have done so had he still been the president of the United States.
That's right. Obama said that if India does not protect the rights of its ethnic minorities, there's strong possibility that at some point India will start pulling apart. And well, India has responded as well, Divya.
Right. The Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman hit out at the former US president, saying that those remarks come from a man under whom they had in fact bombed 6 Muslim countries.
That's right. So the BJP government reacting sharply to Obama's comments and in fact also questioning his comments. The finance minister said she was shocked to hear, as you pointed out, that the US had bombed 6 Muslim majority nations under the presidentship of Barack Obama. In fact, very interestingly, the Prime Minister himself had said in one of his speeches during his US visit that there is no discrimination and democracy is all about human rights.
Absolutely. In fact, we have Johnny Moore, ex-commissioner, joining us of the USCIRF, the former commissioner of US Commission on International Religious Freedom, joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Former President Barack Obama should spend his energy complimenting India more than criticizing. This is what you have said. You do disagree with what was said by the former President of the United States.
Of course I do. I thought it not only was the substance of the comment that was made, but it was the timing. I mean, this was a historic visit. You had the Prime Minister of India in Washington, D.C. with the President of the United States, literally having the most significant conversation happening in the world, the largest democracy in the world, with the oldest democracy in the world coming together to chart this incredible path of peace and prosperity and optimism and security and incredible people-to-people relationships. It was the wrong thing to say at the wrong time by the former president, and it's sort of shocking. I mean, for a leader as sophisticated as he is, to throw that arrow at that moment.
Right, Johnny Moore, a fair point on the timing, but how would he respond to several reports by the US State Department? Just this year, we saw that the US State Department came out with a report talking about how targeted attacks on religious minorities, in a sense, continue. The report also talked about how there's impunity for those who spread hate, and similar concerns were flagged in a report last year as well. Your response to those reports flagged by, no less than the US State Department.
Look, India is not a perfect country, just like the United States is not a perfect country. However, I think sometimes Americans struggle to understand India, period. I mean, in the United States, we have, 380 million people. Almost all of them speak English. A few tens of millions also speak Spanish or another language. It's hard for Americans to understand just the sheer complexity of India. I mean, as you well know, you have 5,000 languages and 2,000 political parties, and you have an incredibly diverse and now the largest country in the world. And so I think sometimes we tend to focus on the if you're watching a cricket match, at the end of the match you have the highlight reels and then you have the blooper reels. And I think sometimes we focus on what things aren't, what isn't perfect, as opposed to celebrating what is working. The United States and the Republic of India should be working together in every single opportunity we possibly can. And so, this is an unhelpful distraction at a very, very important time. And I should just say, whether President Biden was your preferred president as an American, or whether Prime Minister Modi was your preferred prime minister in India, every American and every Indian ought to be doing nothing but celebrating what happened in Washington, D.C. just a few days ago.
Right. So, Johnny Moore, Obama, those comments that were made as far as the minority remark is concerned, is drawn sharp criticism from India, with our finance minister accusing the former president of bombing 6 Muslim nations. What do you make of this war of words right after that historic visit that you're talking about?
Well, I also think this is what happens in democracies. I mean, here we see democracy on grand display. We see this incredible debate in India. We have this incredible debate happening in the United States of America. Somehow this was a criticism of democracy, and yet the answer to it is the very response of everyone. And I don't think that democracy is weak in India, and I don't think that democracy is weak in the United States of America. I think there are plenty of people around the world. There are other countries in the world that want us to believe that the era of democracy is ending. But the one takeaway from the visit in Washington, D.C. is that the era of democracy is just beginning in our world. And a country as diverse as India somehow is the foundation of democracy. It works there. It works in the United States of America. You put our two countries together, we can do extraordinary things together.
One point that you had made was that, as close allies, we should be praising each other publicly and criticizing each other privately. That was one point that you had made. But don't you think that as democracies and as such close allies now, we can perhaps enrich each other with pointing out, such instances, which are being talked about world over? And my second part of that question would be that, what do you make of, foreign coverage of, incidents happening in India? We see top foreign publications in the US as well talking about, these instances of violence in India and how there's impunity for them. So, how do you see that as far as, India is concerned? Foreign coverage vis-a-vis, and not just foreign coverage, I mean coverage in the US vis-a-vis what's happening in India.
As I said, I think in the West, sometimes it's hard to get your head around a country as diverse and complicated as India. But I think it's for the Indian democracy to police itself, just as it's for the American democracy to police itself. And we could expend our energy doing much more helpful things, like collaborating together on the challenges facing our world. The fact of the matter is there's no challenge in our world that cannot be overcome when our two countries come together. But more than just the challenges, there's no opportunity that can't be realized when our two countries come together. So I hope India's vibrant democracy, is always debating what's working and what isn't working, just as I hope it continues to happen in the United States of America. But in democracies, we improve over time. We're not perfect. We're countries of lots of different people. We perfect over time. But when we come together as democracies, there are other countries around the world that deserve our collective criticism. And one of the strange things about this whole thing is, when you have a former president of the United States, you can pick up the phone and call anybody in the world that he wants to call. That's not what happened here. It was a hyperbolic comment about this imaginary unraveling of India. I think the opposite is true. I think the more vibrant the debate is in India, I think the stronger India's democracy actually gets, because that's how democracy works. And leaders ought to call leaders when they have disagreements.
Right.
While
Johnny
we work
Moore,
together on what unites.
The remarks by former US President Barack Obama were aired right before Prime Minister Modi's Congress address. What do you make of the timing of his comments?
It's curious, right? The former president is a very, very sophisticated leader. He doesn't typically make mistakes like that. So either this was entirely out of character, or he or someone knew exactly what they were doing. And I think the former president ought to clarify his comments and expend a lot more energy complimenting India. Because, and by the way, that it was definitely an outlier. What we saw in the United States of America is we saw in an incredibly divided time in our own country where Democrats and Republicans don't get along on almost anything. We had Democrats and Republicans entirely united on this agreement to take the relationship between our two countries to another level. In fact, when I spent time with Prime Minister Modi, and the first thing I said to him when I saw him is I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, you performed a miracle. You unified Democrats and Republicans in the United States." That's where the energy should have gone. And I think it's really, really unfortunate in the timing of this remark.
Right, Johnny Moore, thanks so much for joining there. Fascinating perspective there, isn't it, Divya? Many would disagree, but that's what it is. And as you pointed out, that the timing of Obama's remarks is something that's extremely curious.